Welcome to Why Such a Fuss, an exciting new channel dedicated to help individuals and businesses to learn more about data protection in a way that is easy and engaging. I'm Christina from CVG Solutions, and I am a fully qualified data protection professional. I am passionate about educating, empowering, and enabling businesses to thrive. Remember to like and subscribe to this channel and help us to spread the word. Data protection is there for a reason. It protects you, your family, loved ones, customers, employees from coming to harm through the use of personal data. So make sure you click subscribe. Now, get ready to embark on a journey of growth and knowledge as we dive into the world of data protection. I'm delighted to welcome back Annie McNeely, Quality Management System Professional and an ISO 9001 Auditor. It's so great to have you again on the podcast, Annie.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Good, excellent. Now, today we thought that we share with our audience the challenges that we face as consultants in our respective fields for two main reasons. A, so that other consultants that might be listening do not feel alone, and our experience might provide them with some insights. And B, so that business owners that are thinking of engaging a consultant can then understand these challenges and therefore makes provision to avoid them, which will also then result in making any transition and implementation that we are engaged with much smoother and less painful for them as well, and therefore making the whole process a much nicer experience. Now, Annie, I don't know about you, but whenever I go into a new client, I always have to do an element of education or myth busting, because in my area, in GDPR, there is so many misconceptions. Does that also apply to your area, to the data quality?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Particularly around the ISO standard. There's a lot of misconceptions around that. And in previous podcasts, we sort of touched on some of them. But yeah, I mean, people come to their awareness of ISO via different routes. They may have implemented it in a previous role, or they might have worked somewhere where it has been implemented. They might just be aware of it because it's something that's common in their industry. But it's rare to encounter people who fully understand it. And there's lots of reasons for that, including how consultants deal with it, how their previous employers have dealt with it, for example. But to get the best end result, as you do, I always start by assessing what their understanding is, breaking down any misconceptions, and doing as much as I can to help them properly understand what this thing is, how it works, and how it's going to benefit them at day one. And then the rest of the process gets easier from there.
Absolutely. So with those misconceptions, they need to be removed as quickly as possible, because otherwise the rest's not going to happen. Now, I particularly face a big challenge, or my biggest challenge, when I'm fulfilling the role of DPO, Data Protection Officer, as an external, obviously, as an external DPO. Because they view me as an external, then they're not really engaging me in key meetings. I'm being kept at the periphery. And very often I get the sort of we'll call you or we'll engage with you when we need you. Well, how do you know when you're going to need me? The whole point of the DPO is to be there to provide you with advice and guidance. The more you have your DPO engaged, involved, the more they can do their job properly, and the more you then sort of make sure that you are compliant with the regulation. Just because the DPO happens to be a consultant, then that doesn't mean that you shouldn't involve them. The more you bring them in, the more benefit you as a business will actually have. and the more they can do their job. So I always try and explain that to them. So if anyone here is listening, if you have an external DPO, engage them as much as you possibly can in every meeting, especially leadership meetings. If you are worried about sharing finance information with a consultant, with an external person, then maybe organize the agenda of the meeting so that the finance element is discussed at the end, perhaps, so the DPO can then drop off, or in any case, the DPO is bound by confidentiality, so they can't divulge the information outside. But in any case, if you're still worried, just organize the agenda so that the DPO either comes in later, like 15 minutes later, or they drop off 15 minutes early, but they are there for the majority of the discussion of the meeting. And Annie, do you find that when they bring you in, when a business brings you in, that very often there is a lack of understanding of the complexity of the work involved? Or
yeah, that certainly can be an issue. I mean, in terms of an implementation project, the sort of the depth and breadth of that project, it's only, I can only see so much of that until I'm running the project. So and they certainly often don't understand the sort of the reach, if you like, of a quality management system when it goes in. And so again, ideally you do what you can to help them understand that up front, but it's really only when you start getting into the building the system that they start to feel that impact. And because a quality management system is holistic, it encompasses pretty much the whole business in one way or another. And that sometimes comes as a bit of a surprise, even when you communicate it early on. And actually that ties into what you were just saying in terms of them involving you in things. One of the services I offer to my clients is retained quality management. So for businesses that are too small to have someone doing it internally, they employ me on a sort of fractional basis to inject that quality management expertise into the business. But because sometimes they haven't fully grasped the reach of a quality management system, they don't make the connection between this activity happening over here and its impact on quality. And so I'll go in to do my 2 days a month of quality management and find out that something's happened in my absence that I knew nothing about, which requires a bunch of retrospective actions to make sure everything's back on track and compliant. So that certainly can be challenging. All you can do is try and explain as you go, explain the impact and why that I need to be aware of that stuff up front. There is some advantage if I'm doing the retained quality management and internal auditing, that can be helpful. The internal auditing is helpful because you see more. And depending on how it's structured, you can see things more regularly. So you're a bit more plugged in than if you're just doing the quality management. But yeah, certainly it's not an intentional exclusion. It's just that they're not making the connection between making that change or carrying out that action and what that means for the quality management system. So I have to come in and scoop it up afterwards and rejig things and get it all tidied up again. So it is a problem.
For me, it's the thing is we just need policies. And while you do need policies, of course, but again, GDPR is so much more than just a bunch of policies.
Sure.
And so it's constantly managing those expectations and get them to understand that it's a system similar to obviously deals with different topic, but overall, it's an accountability system once we finished implementing it. And so it's managing those expectations that is key. And the other challenge that I find, and particularly with small businesses, is the tendency to stop and start the work. And very often is to do, obviously they have a limited number of resources, and so they have to prioritize certain things. So it makes it a lot harder for me as the consultant to then implement, because obviously when we stop, then I can't just simply be idle for any length of time, being myself a small business. So then I have to replace that with another contract. And so then, picking the pieces up again and there is always an element of going back a little bit before we can go forward once we start again. So the entire implementation that takes a lot longer, and it can sort of cause frustration on both sides. But so long as we understand that there is the situation, that you can't help it, and I totally understand that, but equally they also have to understand that they can't just expect me to stay idle and jump as soon as they say we're ready now. There has to be this give and take. Do you find the same, or?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, like, as you say, small businesses don't have a lot of project resource to keep this thing moving along internally. So when they get busy, inevitably things slow down. And as you say, we all understand that. The difficulty from my perspective, obviously there is the issue with, okay, if it's delayed for too long, I'm gonna pick up that time somewhere else because I need to be earning my money.
Yes.
But also there's a problem, you can get into this perpetual cycle if you're not careful, whereby you get processes in particular, you get your processes done to a point and then you can't get them signed off for weeks and weeks and weeks because the directors are away or whatever the issue is. And by the time you get back to it, you have to rewrite or update that process because things have changed in the meantime.
Yes, so that causes rework.
That's a typical problem. You've written your process, you're waiting for them to get signed off. By the time someone's there to sign off and actually focus on it, they need to be updated, and it just goes round and round and round and round. You can't move anything forward very effectively. And that is about flagging. All you can do is flag the risks, explain the consequences to the decision makers, and hope that they're able to accommodate or rejig things a bit to keep things moving. And certainly when I start a project, I do a gap analysis and I do a report. And in the report, one of the things I flag is risks to the project, which is, and one of the standard risks in a small business is lack of resource for obvious reasons. And so I flag that risk early days and just identify what the implications can be for the project if the resource is patchy or availability is up and down. So that's all you can do. I mean, like you say, their work is a priority for them, of course, as is ours. So you just have to kind of find a way through that, really. But it can be difficult, certainly.
Yes, absolutely. And another challenge that I come across with, and I'm sure you do this as well. And again, we're talking about small businesses here, so we're not talking about the corporate. A lack of knowledge, understanding of business management methodology and best practices like risk management, change management, understanding what a business continuity plan is, which then it means that I then have to invest extra time, extra education to bring them that knowledge, because those methodologies are key in GDPR when it comes to, in particular, GDPR. So risk management, change management, business continuity plan, carrying out risk assessments, those are key activities. And therefore, if there isn't that knowledge within the business, I need to provide that as an extra element to what I bring. Does that apply to you as well?
100%. So typically small businesses are really good at doing what they do.
Yes.
But the people who have started those businesses very often don't come from a sort of a corporate management background where that stuff is all sort of standard and built in to operations. So yeah, absolutely. There is that additional education piece to do. And sometimes there's a bespoke requirement on top of some of the more standard stuff. I do as much as I can to build that, A, raise the awareness that that's a need, and B, build the time and the cost for the project, build that into the time and the cost for the project, because I want to build systems or put systems in place that actually deliver for a business. I'm not doing it just so they can get the certification. I want the bulk of the benefit comes from the system. But if the system going to work, the people running the system need to understand the methodologies and the mechanisms and the systems that support it. I do try and keep things as jargon free as possible and keep it accessible and straightforward. And so, we're not talking about high level risk management theory. We're talking about something really straightforward that you can manage through a spreadsheet, right? So It needs to be accessible and easy to understand and manageable. And you can always build on it later as their understanding and experience grows. But yeah, absolutely. I frequently have to do sort of mini courses, if you like, on risk management, managing non-conformities, root cause analysis, things like some of those techniques, fishbone, stuff like that, that they can use to support their system. It's part of putting an effective system into a small business.
And the same with me, not just there. Yes, obviously GDPR is low, and so obviously my aim is to get you compliant, to get the business compliant, but also I want to make sure that the business gets value out of it, gets the benefits out of it. So it's not just about ticking the boxes, it's about giving them something that they can work with, that they can embed, and it becomes part of how they operate. And so and basically give them value.
Exactly right.
Yes. Yeah. So the other one is audit. Okay, so audits, they are seen by businesses as sort of like the enemy across, let's wear garden.
Everybody hates an audit. Absolutely.
And I always sort of get, oh, can we do it in February instead of January? And then, can we move it to March? So there is that sort of dreading it, but also not understanding the importance of an audit and the benefit that carrying out regular audits actually brings to the business. And by pushing it constantly to the right, the leadership is also giving a clear message to their staff that GDPR or ISO are not important. And then the consequence of that is that the system that has been implemented is not going to be used and is going to die a slow death. So all the hard work that they have done, we have done, all the money they spent is just going to go out the windows, really. Because the point of the audit is to help the business to maintain that system, whether it's GDPR or whether it's ISO, and to continuously improve it. So so by pushing the audit to the right, they're actually doing themselves a disservice.
So I did my lead auditor qualification. So that's the qualification that you get to be able to do external audits, so certification audits. I did that in 2022, which means that I am trained in the sort of the modern way of auditing, if you like. And the modern approach to auditing is support, helping the business, helping them to improve, positive, input, and so on. The old school approach to auditing at times was about catching them out, finding all the non-conformities you could find, and a sort of more negative approach. So if people have experienced the old approach to auditing as part of their ISO experience, they bring with them sort of baggage, if you like, in terms of, oh my God, audits are horrible. They shouldn't be. They should be positive, supportive, and useful to the business. Now, there's a big caveat to that, which is if you are effectively managing your system and using it day to day and it's part of your operations, audits take care of themselves, because all they're doing is just checking in and making sure you're still compliant.
Yes.
And if your system is effective, you will be. So, they might find some opportunities for improvement or a couple of observations, or even if they find a non-conformity here or there, that's not a big deal. You just make the improvement and you carry on. Audits become stressful when your system, as you mentioned there, when your system is effectively dead, because all you've done is go for the certification and you're not using the system day to day. And then you're in a position where the next, your audit's a month away, and suddenly you've got a situation where your documents are all out of date. None of your processes have been reviewed and updated. You've not been keeping the records you should be the whole system has kind of ground, all the gears of that system have rusted up and seized up and aren't moving. And of course, then an audit will be stressy because there'll be a lot of, unfortunately, negative stuff for an auditor to find. So if you run your system effectively and manage it well, audits are not a problem.
No.
And modern auditors like me are very friendly. So even if it's a bad system or the system's ground to a halt and it isn't working, the auditor will do everything they can to help you get that fixed.
Yes,
You know.
absolutely.
But yeah, manage your system and the audits take care of them.
Yes. I always use the analogy of a car. A car, think of the audit as the MOT that your car has to go through every single year. Yeah. If you've not looked after your car, you're going to fail the MOT. Yeah. But if you have regularly maintained it, then the MOT, you will pass with clean colors. So it's the same analogy. Yeah. If you don't maintain something, it will rust. That's the bottom line.
Similar analogy, which I use for businesses to explain to them why it's important to manage their system. Because again, sometimes people have this experience of ISO just being a paperwork exercise sits in a drawer. What I say to them is, you would not, if you want to grow your business, and the way to do that is to invest in a piece of equipment, for example, or a new IT system, right? That's expensive. It takes time. It takes the time of the people in your business to get that in place and running, right? So you put, as you say, you put all that time and effort, money into that system or that piece of equipment. You would not do that and then let it sit in a corner, not tell anyone that it's there, not train anyone how to use it, not get it properly commissioned, not maintain it, not service it, and then a year later say, well, that was a waste of money.
Yes.
You wouldn't do that. And yet, when it comes to putting a quality management, an ISO system in, people do that all the time. And then, of course, they look back and say, well, we're not getting any benefit out of this system. Well, no, because you're not using it. And B, when the inspector comes around to make sure your equipment is safe, it's not, because you haven't maintained it. So that's the kind of analogy I give business owners. You wouldn't do that with a piece of equipment or any other kind of investment for your business. Yeah. So don't do it with your ISO system either.
Yes. Yeah, same. Yeah. Why treat the GDPR any different from, like you say, an investment of a piece of equipment? Yeah. Now, I don't know whether you've heard this or not, but I'm always told that GDPR is not a sexy or exciting subject. Personally, I would disagree, but the perception is that GDPR and probably ISO as well are not so exciting subject. So, how do you get people interested in them?
So absolutely, I get it. So that's why I call myself a quality management practitioner. That's one of the reasons why I call myself a quality management practitioner, not an ISO consultant. Because when you say ISO, a lot of people glaze over, because it is perceived as very dry and bureaucratic and paperwork, and it's restrictive and all the rest of it. So I don't often talk about that. What I talk about is how managing quality benefits your business. And when you put it in those terms, then people's ears start to prick up a little bit, because they start to see it as a tangible business benefit rather than this painful, bureaucratic, annoying thing they have to do to get that certification. If you start talking about it as a tool that supports longevity and stability and growth for your business, then not everyone, some people will never go for it, but very often you start talking in those terms and you can demonstrate how quality management delivers those things, then people start to get interested in it, because everyone wants to grow their business. However you choose to do that, everyone wants to make more money, have more time, fight fewer fires, have more customers, all the rest of it. So if you can make the link in a way which is understandable, then people buy in.
Yeah, I do. It's very similar in terms of, obviously GDPR is not a standard, is the law, but nobody wants to do something because they have to do something. Do you know what I mean? So I sort of say to them, forget that is the law, right? Just put that to one side for the minute and actually show them what they can lose or gain if they implement. So if they don't implement, actually, that could mean loss of reputation and credibility, and that will lead to loss of clients, loss of revenue. And so that could actually destroy their business, because all they need is one person making a complaint, and that could lead to lawsuits, again, name and shaming on social media, et cetera, et cetera. While instead, if they become compliant, if they embrace it, first of all, that will increase their reputation and credibility. They will be ahead of their competitors. So then GDPR becomes part of their USP, unique selling point. And they will also attract larger clients, and because they've embraced the GDPR system, the accountability system, they will then operate within a higher performance, which then support and sustain their growth, longevity, stability. They will be much more flexible and responsive to improvements, which will also lead to cost savings. So actually, it's a win-win from every angle you're looking at it. And so when I put it in those terms, then it becomes much more palatable and digestible to a business. And they actually start to see that it's worth the pain that the implementation will inevitably cause. But it's a pain that then at the end will bring a lot of benefits. And obviously you only have to go through the pain once if it's maintained.
Exactly. Upfront pain for long-term gain.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And as a woman in your field, Annie, do you face some particular specific challenges by the fact that you are a woman in your field?
I do. I mean, it's a changing landscape these days, because there was a time when it was very male dominated, because typically consultants were former quality managers or ops managers in manufacturing who were very often male, and then they would go self-employed and become consultants and auditors and so on. Nowadays, it's much more balanced. There are a lot more women in the industry. I think the challenge for me initially comes in, it depends on the business and the nature of what the client, when I say the business, I mean my clients, obviously. It depends what they do.
Yeah.
So, for example, a recruitment company is not an issue at all. Whereas in a small manufacturing company or in an engineering business, for example, if it's a more male-dominated industry or company, then sometimes initially you can face a little bit of skepticism in terms of, well, what does she know about engineering or what have you. I'm fortunate in that my background is very varied. And so I can usually find some common ground when I go into a business and start talking to them sort of in their own terms, which very quickly then sort of starts to break down those barriers. But there often is that, and can be that sort of initial skepticism, at times.
Yes. I mean, in my field, in GDPR, there is a pretty good balance between, in terms of male and female GDPR data protection professionals. So that's good. But also, I think because women in the field of law, they have been around for quite a while. We're well established. So I don't find that the resistance, if you want, or that challenge. Also, I suppose for me, the fact that I come from an IT management background and I've worked with some large government bodies like the MOD or the MOJ, that also gives me credibility, and can, depending on who I'm working with, can also be, an advantage. I suppose manufacturing, it's a bit more male driven still. So I don't have many manufacturers on my books. And it's also not particularly an area that I'm particularly sort of wanting to target. I mean, if it happens, it happens. And I'm more than happy to work at manufacturers, but I didn't start thinking of manufacturing as my target business. I suppose that would be where I would find it much more challenging. But otherwise, so far, I've not encountered, and in fact, I've encountered the opposite, where I've been selected because I'm a woman. So that is quite interesting as well to look at that from that perspective. They found it that because I was a woman, I would be more flexible, more understanding and empathetic to their,
Approachable, maybe.
yeah, approachable, yes. So yes, so so sometimes the fact that I'm a woman, it works to my advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, same. I think that it certainly can be an advantage, especially if you're going in and doing. It's difficult to put a quality management system in without being a little bit disruptive, not necessarily even in a negative way, but you're asking for people's time,
Yes.
and you might start having to ask them to do things in a slightly different way. And yeah, sometimes it can be a little bit of an advantage. It may be seen as a little bit less of an imposition, or so. Yeah, it can work to your advantage, certainly. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Annie, thank you ever so much for joining us again today. Would you like to remind our audience how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn just under my name, Annie McNeely. You can see my website, which is anniemcneely.co.uk. And if you want to drop me a line, anniemcneely.co.uk.
If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumb up and remember to click on the subscribe or follow button. If you would like to get in touch with me, I can be found on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search for CVG Solutions, or alternatively, email me at info@cvgsolutions.co.uk.